welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. And for our fourth segment of the day, we go back to the NFL, starting our positional rankings, looking ahead to Week 13, Thanksgiving week in the NFL, if you will, with our QBs. All four of the guys I have compiled for the list this week are tried and true fantasy stars. Maybe one not necessarily on the level of all of the other guys, but he could get there, and I like his fantasy prospects this week in this game. And so I feel like, this position is going to start to clarify a little bit more as games either get more important for certain teams or less important down the stretch because of the consistency of those top-tier QBs. I'm going to try and throw in as many, sleepers as possible at the position, but just so you know, I expect to see a lot more high-level talent here entering this list week in, week out, as games get a little more easy, shall we say, manageable for these top-tier teams. So without further ado, let's jump into our list for Week 13. Starting off with a guy who played last night. Certainly was not the focal point of that game, and everyone knows who was, but I still feel like in a matchup against a very similar quarterback, very similar offense in that regard, this guy's going to shine. Jalen Hurts, going up against perhaps the most similar quarterback to him in the NFL at the moment, in Lamar Jackson against the Ravens next week. Only had 15.06 fantasy points last night against the Rams, but I feel like, in this matchup, it's more about the weapons he has at his disposal and how he's using his dual threat ability in this offense that really makes me think he's going to stand out in this one a little bit more over Lamar. Because when I look at these two teams, right, they are starkly similar in nature, but I just feel the talent, and this is something I said previewing last night's game for the Eagles, is just at a level where Jalen Hurts can be comfortable doing whatever he wants in this offense. He can either rely on Saquon, much like he did last night, and just supplement him in a way that's effective and efficient and, most importantly, turnover-free, or he can play hero ball because he has that in his repertoire as well, and he has the receivers to do it as well. And so Jalen Hurts, what I'm saying about him right now is that he has more of a fallback option than Lamar in this game. And so, say whatever you want. Maybe you're thinking this is the time where the Eagles fall off their perch right now as potentially the second best team, not just in the NFC, but in the league. And the Ravens beat them up a little bit. But I'm taking Jalen Hurts in this matchup just because from what I've seen of this offense. And sometimes it's not all about the individuality of a quarterback in certain matchups. It's more about the structure of his team and how they're playing during a given time. And what I'm seeing is every single piece of that Eagles offense firing on all cylinders. And Jalen Hurts has been masterful in being its leader, whether it just be by taking a step back and letting Saquon do his thing, or taking over games the way we know he can. So that's why, in my mind, he's my potential best star of the weekend. We aren't going to be doing a start-sit-'em segment this week. And I'm saying you can lock him in against the Ravens as well. And besides, like we always say here on the show, the Ravens are not a good pass defense. So this could be an opportunity for Jalen Hurts to have his moment in this offense as well. And then next, another guy who had a pretty down, humdrum week. Only 10.26 fantasy points against Indy. But in a matchup where on Thanksgiving Day, in prime time, he's going to have the opportunity to do as he always does in big moments. Jared Goff going up against the Bears here. And I love this matchup for him just because, even though the Bears have seemingly one of the better defenses in the league, one of the more effective against the pass, this feels like one of those games where Jared Goff takes advantage of a team that's going in the right direction but not taking that next step. The Bears are, a team that very well could have a winning record, could be contending for an NFC wildcard spot at the least because of shooting themselves in the foot just haven't reached that level. The Lions, meanwhile, are a team that once was very much alike this Bears team, but now take advantage of teams like the Bears. This could get ugly for the Bears in this match because I feel like this is the most precise version of Jared Goff we've seen in his NFL career, where, even though he had that 5 interception game, he's still moving the ball efficiently. He's throwing it accurately into all levels of the field. He's trusting guys outside of, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporta, guys like Williams, guys like Raymond, trusting his run game a lot more, which opens up even more for him. So the diversity of this Lions offense is going to be too much for a young Bears secondary who I've said I've admired all season, but are slowly starting to show cracks in their armor. And so this could be either a very competitive divisional game where it could be a surprising shootout, or it could be the Jared Goff game where he just has his will and imposes it on the Bears. And so that's why I feel like you can't go wrong with this matchup, looking at Jared Goff and how he looks this season. And then my third guy here, a guy who we talked about a little bit earlier in the show, talking about him performing in prime time this week, tonight, against the Ravens, going up against the Falcons next week, coming off of a bye, Justin Herbert. Now I feel like, well, actually not a bye, I'm sorry, I messed that up because he is playing tonight, like I said. But I feel like, no matter the opponent, I always feel like the Chargers have a guy like Justin Herbert in their back pockets. What I mean by that is sometimes he may not be needed as much in certain matchups. Sometimes you will allow J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards to dominate the game. But what he's proven over these past couple of weeks is that he's still the elite talent we know he is. And I think he's going to prove it tonight. And then next week, I feel like it's the Falcons coming off the bye. I feel like he's going to prove why over these past couple of weeks a lot of people have started to respect him a little bit more yet again. And the Falcons, again, another very weak pass defense. And not necessarily in the best of spots even after the bye. But still a moment for Justin Herbert to really take advantage of how he's grown into the system. Because a lot of his play comes down to Jim Harbaugh's reliance on him. A lot more so than, say, his time in college, coaching college with Michigan, with J.J. McCarthy. I feel like J.J. McCarthy was more of someone who supplemented the attack in a way that allowed that run game to breathe. Whereas Justin Herbert can take full advantage of a defense at least expecting him to throw the ball deep or to spread it around to his different weapons. And so, the Falcons team that's reeling, even after the bye, expects Justin Herbert to shine yet again. And I feel like, this is the moment where we can see his name start to pop up on these kinds of lists week in, week out, because he's starting to generate a lot of buzz in the National Football League, including his coach, who believes he is one of the great quarterbacks in the NFL right now and potentially be a Hall of Famer. Maybe not yet temper expectations on him, Jim, but I do feel like he's at the point where he's now becoming one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. And last but not least, the guy who I said could reach that elite status in the future, but still is a little bit too raw for me to fully trust. But I think in this matchup, a matchup that's proven to be a fantasy gold mine for a lot of quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson going with the Patriots should have a decent game. Not for nothing, it wasn't terrible against the Lions in this one. 12.98 fantasy points versus Detroit. It's just that, the Lions are the Lions. They are a dominant football team, no matter how you slice it. And Anthony Richardson would have had a tough going of it, if he were with the Chiefs roster, if he were with the Bills roster. So, there's no blame on him. It's no fault of his own that, even with that pretty bang average performance, it couldn't have been better. But I digress because this matchup has proven over these past few weeks to allow QBs to shine. And I feel like, Anthony Richardson could be the most beneficial in terms of how he can attack this Pats defense, because Matthew Stafford 2 weeks ago in Foxborough had a nice performance, a very solid passing performance, whereas Tua as well kind of displayed his abilities from the pocket as a passer as well, instead of taking off and running. Both of those guys more pure pocket passers, I would say. Tua's a little bit more mobile, but now Anthony Richardson has an opportunity to really attack the Pats both with his arm and his legs. So that's why I feel like this matchup could be a coming out party for a guy like Anthony Richardson, who we're all expecting to see a big game from soon. He had one a couple weeks ago against the Jets, his first game back actually after being benched. So he has it in him. But I want to see it yet again to prove that these raw traits in him are being tapped to the best of their abilities, and they can get the most out of him in this Colts offense. And so, yes, it's not the toughest of matchups, but look for him to continue to shine for the Colts in these kinds of matchups. But that'll just about do it for my QB rankings. Let me know what you think in the comments about them. Coming up to conclude today's show, my Don't Be Surprised If segment, where I look at some bold fantasy claims for this week, and you'll see if you like them, because sometimes you may not. But we'll be right back after this short break to conclude today's show.